My name is Lena and I am 38 years old. For most of my life my world was measured in scents and flavors. As a sommelier, I could tell you the story of a wine from a single sip. The soil, the sun, the rain, the hands that tended the grapes. My palate was my art, and my husband, Marcus, was my gallery. He was a celebrated restaurateur, the charismatic face of our culinary empire. I was the secret weapon, the curator of the legendary wine cellars that earned his establishments their stars. We were, by all accounts, the perfect pairing, bold, complex, with a finish that promised forever. Our life was a whirlwind of opening nights, glowing reviews, and clinking glasses. Marcus was the showman. He could charm a food critic and a nervous investor with the same easy smile. I was the quiet one, the one who found truth at the bottom of a glass. My real passion, the one I shared only with him, was not in curating the wines of others, but in the dream of creating our own. It was a legacy, a story passed down to me. My grandfather, a stubborn old man with hands like oak roots, had owned a small, high-altitude vineyard. It was his obsession. For 30 years, he'd been secretly working on a passion project, a new grape varietal, a hybrid that could not only survive the harsh, unpredictable frosts of the region, but would produce a wine with an impossibly complex profile, notes of dark cherry, leather, and a whisper of mountain herbs. He called the vine anima, the soul. It was his life's work, documented in a series of leather-bound journals filled with his elegant, spidery script. When he passed away, the vineyard fell into disrepair, and the journals came to me. They were my most prized possession. One rainy evening, wrapped in blankets in front of our fireplace, I finally shared my secret with Marcus. I opened the journals, my voice trembling as I read my grandfather's words, explaining the delicate process of grafting, the years of failed attempts, the final, triumphant breakthrough. "This is it, Marcus," I whispered, my heart wide open. "This is our future. We could bring this back to life. My grandfather's legacy. Our legacy." Marcus held me, his eyes shining with what I thought was shared excitement. He traced the drawings in the journal, his touch reverent. "Lena, this is genius," he breathed. "Your grandfather was a visionary. We have to do this. But we have to be smart. We keep it secret, protect it, until the time is right. This is our ace in the hole." His words were a balm. I felt seen, understood. I had given him the key to the most sacred part of my history, and he had promised to guard it. For the next 2 years, the dream of anima was our secret love language. We'd talk about it late at night, planning the revival of the vineyard, the design of the bottle, the day we would finally share it with the world. I trusted him completely. My love for him was a cellar-aged vintage, deep, unwavering, and I believed, priceless. The first discordant note came subtly. Marcus started taking secretive business trips. Vineyard sourcing, he'd say vaguely. Looking for the next big thing. I thought nothing of it. It was his job. Then he announced a massive new venture, his own exclusive wine label, under his brand, Marcus Hale Vintners. "It's just a small batch to start," he explained, pouring me a glass of something else, a distraction. "A special collaboration with a little-known vineyard. You'll love it." A cold knot of unease began to form in my stomach. A little-known vineyard? He had been my partner in every acquisition, every decision. This was the first time he'd moved without me. When I asked for details, he was evasive. "It's a surprise, my love. I want to blow you away." The unease grew. A few weeks later, I overheard him on the phone in his study, his voice low and urgent. I only caught a few words. "Genetic sequence, stable, cloning process, keep it contained." My blood ran cold. Those were terms from my grandfather's journals. I confronted him, my voice shaking. He laughed it off, his smile a little too bright. "Darling, you're hearing things. That was about a new truffle supplier. You've got vines on the brain." He pulled me into a hug, but it felt different. It wasn't a fortress, it was a cage. He was gaslighting me, making me feel as though my intuition, the very skill our empire was built on, was failing me. The moment of shattering truth came not from a sound, but a taste. He was hosting a private tasting for his top investors for the launch of his new flagship wine. He called it Elysian Reserve. He was so proud, so confident. He poured a glass for me first, a theatrical gesture of respect. "To my muse," he said, raising his glass to me, the investors applauding softly. I lifted the deep burgundy liquid to my lips. I swirled it, inhaled. The aroma hit me like a physical blow. Dark cherry. Leather. And there, beneath it all, the unmistakable, phantom scent of mountain herbs. It couldn't be. My hands trembled as I took a sip. The story was all there on my palate. The high altitude, the struggle against the cold, the unique minerality of the soil, my soil. It was anima. It was my grandfather's soul in a glass, and my husband was serving it to a room of strangers under his own name. I looked at him, searching his eyes for any flicker of shared memory, of guilt, of love. There was nothing. Only the polished, empty brilliance of a successful man who had forgotten the source of his light. He had not just stolen a grape. He had stolen my grandfather's 30 years of struggle. He had stolen the dream that was supposed to be ours. He had taken my heart, my history, and my future, bottled it, and put a price tag on it. In that silent, crowded room, my perfect pairing with Marcus curdled into a poison with a finish of pure, unadulterated betrayal. The world didn't stop. The investors applauded. Marcus beamed. And I stood there, a ghost at the feast, the taste of my stolen legacy turning to ash in my mouth. I smiled, a brittle, fragile thing, and excused myself. That night, I didn't cry. The shock was too deep, too cold. It settled in my bones like a frost, and in that chilling clarity, a plan began to form. He would not get away with this. An accusation was worthless. It would be my word against his. The beloved restaurateur against the emotional, behind-the-scenes wife. I needed proof. Cold, hard, scientific proof. My grandfather's journals were my guide. In them, he had detailed the unique genetic markers of the anima vine, the DNA that made it unlike any other grape in the world. I needed to prove that the wine in Marcus's Elysian Reserve bottle came from the vines on my family's land. My first mission was to secure a sample. I needed an unopened bottle of Elysian Reserve. Marcus kept the first case in our climate-controlled cellar, a vault to which only he and I had the code. The next evening, while he was at a celebratory dinner, I walked into the cellar. The air was cool and still. My heart hammered against my ribs as I keyed in the code. I found the ornate wooden crate, his name branded on the side. I carefully slid one bottle out, my fingers tracing the label. It felt like sacrilege. I replaced it with a cheap decoy bottle of similar shape and weight. No one would ever know. The second part was harder. I needed a living sample from the source, a cutting from one of the original anima vines in my grandfather's derelict vineyard, a 3-hour drive away. I hadn't been back in years, the grief still too raw. I told Marcus I was visiting an old friend for a couple of days. He barely looked up from his phone. Have fun, darling. The drive was a pilgrimage into my past. The old vineyard was just as I remembered, wild and overgrown, but the vines were still there. Hardy. Resilient. I found the specific row my grandfather had marked in his journals. Using his old shears, I took a small cutting, wrapping it carefully in damp cloth. I sat there for a long time, the ghosts of my childhood and the weight of my future swirling around me. I made a silent promise to my grandfather. I would honor his work. I would reclaim his soul. Now I had the evidence, but I needed an ally to analyze it. I thought of Dr. Alistair Finch. He was a retired enologist and botanist, my grandfather's oldest and dearest friend. He was a man of science and integrity, living a quiet life in the countryside. I drove straight to his cottage. When I laid out the vine cutting, the bottle of wine, and my grandfather's journals on his cluttered oak table, his eyes, clouded with age, sharpened with a fierce intelligence. He listened to my story without interruption, his hands steepled under his chin. That boy always had charm, but it was the hollow kind, Alistair said, his voice a low rumble. He never understood that the soul of a wine comes from honesty. He agreed to help immediately. His old university lab owed him a few favors. He could get the DNA of the vine cutting sequenced and compare it to a sample extracted from the wine. It will be irrefutable, he assured me. A genetic fingerprint. While Alistair worked on the science, I worked on the stage. Marcus was planning a spectacular international launch for Elysian Reserve in 3 weeks at the Global Food and Wine Gala, the most prestigious event of the year. He would be the keynote speaker. It was the perfect venue for his public coronation, and I would make it the stage for his execution. I needed to control the narrative. I reached out to Isabella Rossi, a respected, ruthless investigative journalist who specialized in the culinary world. Her articles were known for their meticulous research and their power to topple giants. I sent her an anonymous, encrypted email. The story behind Marcus Hale's Elysian Reserve is a fraud. I have scientific proof. Like a shark smelling blood in the water, she replied in minutes. We communicated secretly. I fed her the story, the history, the excerpts from the journals. I told her about the DNA test, promising her the exclusive on the results the night of the gala. She was hooked. The week before the event, the lab results came in. Alistair called me, his voice grim but triumphant. It's a 100% match, Lena. The wine in that bottle came from your grandfather's vines. There is no doubt. The final piece was in place. That night, I went home and found Marcus in our living room, rehearsing his keynote speech. He was radiant, glowing with success. How do I look? He asked, spinning in his tailored suit. Like a king, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. He smiled, oblivious. That's the idea. Lena, we're on the verge of everything we ever dreamed of. The we was like a knife in my gut. I looked at this man I had loved, this stranger who had hollowed out my life for his own ambition. There was no rage left, only a vast, empty space where my love used to be. Marcus, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I know about Anima. He froze. For a single, fleeting second, I saw a crack in his polished facade. Panic. Then, it was gone, sealed over with that familiar, patronizing smile. Anima? Oh, your grandfather's project. Darling, you're still obsessed with that? It's a lovely story, a nice memory, but Elysian is something else entirely. Something I built. I have proof, Marcus. He laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. Proof of what? That you're a jealous wife who can't stand to see her husband succeed on his own? Don't do this, Lena. Don't embarrass yourself. That was it. He had twisted my legacy into his success, and now he was twisting my truth into delusion. He gave me no choice. You're right, I said, turning to walk away. I wouldn't want to embarrass myself. I paused at the door. Good luck with your speech. Make it memorable. He turned back to the mirror, adjusting his tie, already dismissing me. He had no idea that the memory he was about to create would be one of utter and complete ruin. The night of the Global Food and Wine Gala was electric. The ballroom was a galaxy of glittering chandeliers and the hushed, important murmurs of the culinary world's elite. On every table, in a silver ice bucket, stood a bottle of Elysian Reserve. The stage was set, a massive screen behind the podium displaying the elegant Marcus Hale Vintner's logo. I was not there. Instead, I was with Alistair in a small AV control room 2 floors above the ballroom, a technician we had hired for the evening sitting silently at his console. My heart was a steady, rhythmic drum. The time for emotion was over. This was about justice. Downstairs, Marcus took the stage to a wave of applause. He was in his element, a maestro conducting his symphony of success. He began to speak, his voice smooth and captivating, weaving a story for the audience. Wine is not just a drink, he began, his voice resonating through the hall. It is a story. It is a history. And tonight, I want to share with you the story of Elysian Reserve. It's a story of passion, of a relentless search for perfection. As he spoke, I gave a quiet nod to the technician. On her phone, Isabella Rossi received my one-word text, now. A moment later, her article went live on the website of the world's most influential food journal. The headline was devastating. A stolen legacy. The truth behind Marcus Hale's Elysian Reserve is a tale of deceit and genetic theft. On stage, Marcus was building to his climax. They said a grape of this complexity couldn't be grown in such a climate. But I discovered a lost vineyard, a forgotten place where magic was still possible. I nurtured it. I brought it back to life. This wine, this is my soul in a bottle. In the audience, the first phone lit up. Then another, and another. A ripple of whispers spread through the room. The story was breaking, passed from phone to phone, the digital truth spreading faster than any lie. My soul in a bottle, Marcus repeated, his voice swelling with false emotion. Show them the real soul, I whispered to the technician. With a press of a button, the Marcus Hale Vintner's logo on the giant screen behind him vanished. It was replaced by a split-screen image. On the left was a scanned page from my grandfather's journal, showing his hand-drawn diagram of the Anima grape's unique DNA helix. On the right was the official lab report, stark and clinical, showing the identical DNA sequence extracted from Elysian Reserve. Underneath, in huge, bold letters, were the words, 100% genetic match. The stolen vine, Anima. A collective gasp went through the ballroom. Marcus, blinded by the stage lights, hadn't seen the change. He only sensed the shift in the room's atmosphere. The rapt attention had turned into a stunned, horrified silence. "This is the culmination of my life's work," he said, his voice faltering as he finally noticed that no one was looking at him. They were all staring, aghast, at the screen behind him. He turned. His face, projected in high definition onto two other screens flanking the stage, went through a rapid, sickening transformation. The confident smile collapsed. The color drained from his skin. The charismatic showman vanished, replaced by a trapped, exposed fraud. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He was standing on the biggest stage of his life, exposed by the ghost of a man he'd robbed and the woman whose heart he had broken. The story he had been telling was over. Mine had just been proven true. I didn't stay to watch him crumble. Alistair placed a comforting hand on my shoulder as we quietly left the control room. We didn't need to see the fallout. We could feel it. The empire Marcus had built on a foundation of lies had just been leveled by a single, undeniable truth. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The gala ended in chaos. The Elysian Reserve was recalled. Lawsuits from distributors and investors buried him. His restaurants, tainted by the scandal, shuttered one by one. His name became a cautionary tale whispered at bars and in kitchens. I filed for divorce, asking for nothing but what was rightfully mine, the deed to my grandfather's land and the legal rights to the Anima grape varietal. His lawyers didn't even fight it. Months later, I stood in the vineyard. It was no longer derelict. I had hired a small, dedicated team, and together, we were slowly, carefully, bringing it back to life. The air smelled of damp earth and new leaves. Alistair was with me, his old eyes twinkling with pride. He handed me a cluster of the dark, almost black Anima grapes, warmed by the afternoon sun. I plucked one from the stem and put it in my mouth. The taste was explosive, a perfect balance of sweet and tart, complex and true. It was the taste of my past and the promise of my future. It was the taste of home. Marcus had tried to steal my story, but he never understood. A story isn't something you can own. It's something you earn. And standing there, under the wide-open sky, with my grandfather's legacy in my hands, I was finally ready to tell my own.